to the credit crisis, we were told that tourism, certainly in this part of Africa, contributed about 8% to GDP, and authorities were expecting to see it contribute double digits to GDP. Then the credit crisis happened, then austerity measures kicked in, and visitors stopped coming to Africa in their droves. Has that situation improved drastically?
I think it's fair to say that South Africa had an interesting year with the World Cup. If you back out the World Cup figures in South Africa year on year, you're quite right, it went back. But South Africa's an exception to the rest of the continent. If you look at East and you look at West Africa, business travel and tourism is actually year on year growing, and it's seen to be in a very sustainable sector. I agree, it's roughly around about 9% of GDP. Trajectory is still looking towards 5–5.5% per annum, which is, as a company, why we're interested in the tourism sector. So I think that the future looks positive, and that's why Lonrho's in the tourism market.
This emphasis on business tourism, obviously, it reiterates and affirms this idea that a lot of Africa funds have raised interest on Africa. We're seeing a lot more foreign direct investment, an increase of 87% into the continent. But are there facilities available? And I'm talking here conferencing facilities and all the kinds of things that businessmen and women are looking for when they go into a destination.
It's a very good question, Lonrho, and that's why I'm in my business, to be honest. We want to provide those meeting rooms, that accommodation, that excellent breakfast, and very much be the business hub in the fast growth destinations of the continent. But that's what Lonrho's done all the time that Lonrho has been in existence. Yeah. We have been a diversified conglomerate across the African continent and looking at where we see the commercial opportunities. So while that's supporting the mining industry, while that's Fly 540, which is now #2 airline in East Africa, while that's in food processing, while that's in fisheries, or while it's hotels, we're always looking for developing markets. So to your point, within the hotel sector, we think there's a genuine need for a 5-star, 4-star business-orientated hotel in the high-growth nodes of the continent, and that's where my team's focus is.
Okay, then this raises the question of the kinds of investments that are needed in property development, because if there's a shortage of supply, you're needing to put up and build those hotels, or are you just refurbishing existing buildings?
We have a repertoire. We're on the London market, we're on the GSE. So as a conglomerate, as a sale of market listing, our investors are looking for us to find the best deals each time. So sometimes that means we actually invest our own capital, sometimes we work with partners who bring the capital to the table. But your examples could well be refurbishment of landmark historical hotels that have been government assets, and they've been given a lot of pressure from the IMF and others to try and liquidate those away from government infrastructure to more private infrastructure, as well as greenfield sites. At this point, Lonrho Hotels has a number of greenfield projects around the continent where we see the growth, if you like, where the infrastructure is not there today. And hotels, to us, are really an infrastructural investment. It's takeoff. It's city centre, it's airport, and then you need a hotel.
Let's talk about those greenfield projects where you have to literally start a hotel from its genesis. I mean, property has been, to a large extent, the casualty of this credit crisis that I spoke about. We just saw sales figures dropping. We're seeing the valuations of properties also declining. And then there's the caveat in Africa. It's very difficult to own land because a lot of the land is owned by the state. So you either have to enter into a long-term leasing arrangement, but it's very difficult to actually just own the land, even if you own the asset on it. So how do you overcome those kinds of issues in terms of property rights, but at the same time making the property investment meaningful in an environment where the returns are very poor?
It's a really good question. If you look at what's happened in Asia, what's happened in Western Europe, a lot of the growth in my industry and other industries has been property as well as operational, so a revenue as well as a property play. Where we now think the growth in Africa is going to increasingly come from is that property component. If you look at what McKinsey said last year with regard to the fact from 2000 to 2008, Africa had higher returns than any other emerging market across the continent. Part of that was real estate return. So if you look at what countries are doing with regard to legislation, what they're doing to encourage commerce, more and more ministers are waking up to the reality that you have to have the correct laws and regulations in place that enterprises can own, and they can take a stake, they can take skin in the game, if you like, which tends to be a phrase that's commonly used, as well as in a position to do the operation. So for us as Lonrho, we're in a position where we're looking for capital receipt, but to be honest, when I'm raising debt today, they're looking at for cash receipts. They're saying, is your business sustainable with regard to sustaining debt? And that means that sometimes we put in our own capital, as I say, we'll do leases and we'll do management contracts. But where I think we manage our risk better than other players in my market is the fact that we're fully focused on commercial destinations. If you look at what's happened in tourism, the biggest drops in demand happen when the Americans or the Chinese suddenly decide not to travel. Now, that doesn't happen when you're chasing gold, copper and other commodities.
Let's talk about those commercially viable destinations. At the moment, you have investments in Mozambique, and we do know it's increasingly a tourism hotspot. And we do know the government really supports the industry because they've identified prime land in about 3 locations where they want to see tourism resorts being built en masse, and they're talking about billions of dollars of investment. So they create the policy that enables you. How do you piggyback off that?
I think that's correct in some occasions, but other occasions not always. If you look at Beira is the second city in Mozambique. As Lonrho, we are speculating in the fact that that's going to become a major travel hub. The harbour, the infrastructure into the central of Africa. So what we're doing is not just looking at hotels, we're looking at a full mixed-use development. And we're talking to premier retailers here in South Africa who now want some exposure to what you've quite rightly identified as a fast-growing economy. Mozambique is outstripping South Africa with regard to growth. So if you're a retailer or you're a property developer and you want to get exceptional returns, don't invest in South Africa today. Come to Mozambique, and that's why we're doing a mixed-use development, because we're being asked by retailers, property developers, to not just do hotels, but to make a complete destination. And that's, in revenue terms, or investment terms is better, to be honest, as well as it adds value to my guest. More to do when you arrive at the hotel.
And finally, so Mozambique provides great incentives, but you're also involved in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zimbabwe, which we can argue, but we won't argue, that these are post-conflict countries in this reconstructive phase, and that there are a lot of infrastructure and political risks when you enter these markets. How do you operate in those environments?
You have to learn how to operate in the DRC, for instance. From our perspective, we employ a lot of local people. We invest in understanding how the country and how the legal systems work. We have very good connections at governmental as well as commercial. But Kinshasa, never mind the opportunity of the DRC, Kinshasa is going to be the biggest city in Africa in a very short time frame. That means as a hotel company, we want to be big in that market. We want to be the event destination, the hotel destination. We want to be the catalyst to help the DRC achieve its economic prosperity. And the sense we have is there's been lots of challenges in the past, but now that administratively, the focus of what the government's trying to achieve, as well as an appetite for investment in the country, we're not alone. There's lots of people who see the opportunity.
I mean, very briefly, we've got to end this conversation now, unfortunately. I mean, if you go into the DRC, for instance, it's a guaranteed situation that the roads are in a bit of a state, that energy has supply issues. So as you construct your hotel or refurbish one, you've got to provide additional capital for generators and possibly for other means in which visitors can reach your destination. I know personally, when I've had to go into countries in Equator, into places in Equator province, you have to take a flight, you can't drive there. So it's that kind of condition that you're operating in. It's a costly environment.
Loretta, you're correct. When every single Lonrho hotel has 100% generator capacity, every hotel we have. Every single hotel has satellite connectivity, so we have lightning fast Wi-Fi. We do that investment's because that's what our guests demand. They're there to do business. They want it to be as easy as they possibly can. So our commitment to them is the fact that we will make that capital investment. We'll spend more than maybe South African operators do in giving that quality of service and experience, because we know we'll get the loyalty back in return. Because our customers know they book with confidence, you're going to have lightning fast Wi-Fi, you're going to have a great night's sleep, you're never going to have the lights going off, and the hot shower in the morning is guaranteed.